This is Pantora, my 1,000-gallon cloud rainforest vivarium, home to a vast array of plants, fungi, and creatures, all interconnected in a delicate food web I've watched develop over the past 4 months. This tropical ecosystem within glass is a personal biological project and has been quite the eye-opening experience watching the lives of the plants and creatures unfold as they would in the wild. But one of the things I've learned through observing the natural world in such a controlled environment is that Mother Nature has a way of taking control into her own hands and allowing chaos to steer the ship. I was shocked when last week I spotted this intruder inside the vivarium. Wait, what is that? A ghost ant! How did a ghost ant get in here? Oh no! I'm afraid a new ant war has come. Welcome to the AntsCanada Ant Channel. Please subscribe to my channel and hit the bell icon. Welcome to the AC family. Enjoy. The ghost ant scurried its way down the glass towards the lower portion of Pantora. It pained me to see that ghost ants had officially infiltrated the rainforest. How did they get in here? Well, I am assuming the tiny invasive ants broke in through the mesh, which I thought was small enough to keep them out. But turns out I was wrong. The ghost ant proceeded to explore the asparagus fern, and soon exploded in speed with excitement, exploring new lands it knew was a jackpot discovery. It was one of the many scouts that the main colony had sent out, and this ghost ant would be reporting its findings back to its colony to let it know what it had seen, smelt, and tasted in these lands. If you're new to ants, these ghost ants, which get their name from their semi-transparent gasters that sometimes make them look like floating ant heads, are some of the world's worst invasive ants that have invaded all tropical regions of the world, including my country, where they often infiltrate homes, eat what they can, then move on. They are tiny ants, but thankfully their queens are too big to fit through the mesh of the vivarium. Or at least I hoped. Even still, a barrage of ghost ants sweeping through the rainforest could be disastrous. And if this ant found something worth summoning the literal horde that is its colony, which could be millions of ghost ants, that could be big trouble. Now I didn't know it yet, but this ghost ant did find something of value, a highly prized resource to its colony here in Pantora. But I wouldn't find out what it was until later. When it was done exploring, I watched as the ghost ant proceeded back along the same path it had come to leave the vivarium and return to its colony. I just hoped the ant wouldn't be calling them all for a mass invasion of the new lush land it had found in our rainforest. My main fear was that the new invasive guests might wage war against some of the native ants that lived in Pantora. Like the acrobat ants, these little gals were energetic, fierce, and were on a mission to claim all of Pantora as their kingdom. They walked with their gasters held high above their heads, fully prepared to shoot formic acid at any moment, and one acrobat ant had smelled the alien pheromones of the ghost ant that had visited their territory. If it ever found a ghost ant, it would surely be calling for backup. The only time they weren't traveling with their gasters cocked was when they were completely at ease. This acrobat happily strolled through the herds of mealybugs on the asparagus ferns. By the way, I think these acrobat ants officially need a name. Any name suggestions? Let me know in the comments. They were busy now setting up camp in their newest nest location within the Hallelujah tree stump. The babies have been moved! The queen's secure, the ants announced as they wandered the opening to their new nest. Guards patrolled the outside of the stump for danger, ensuring no enemies would cross acrobat lines. Because the acrobat ants knew that although this stump was their new residence, there were other ants that had lived here first and were definitely a potential danger of concern. The Dark Horde, an invasive colony of black crazy ants, were on the move to another location within the Stump. I watched their trail as they were deep in the middle of a colony moving campaign to a new hole they had found. These invasive ants, unlike the ghost ants, were actually transported unintentionally into the rainforest by way of the plants right from the get-go, and controlling them has been a mission and a half. I've managed to get rid of the majority of the colony, but they were well on their way to regeneration of their dark dominion over the rainforest. They were laying low these past couple of weeks, and for a while I thought they were on their way to dying out, but as you can see, that was far from the truth. I followed their trail up the Stump. They were coming from the other side of the Stump and moving to a location closer to the acrobat ants. And this queen was in the middle of laying an egg during the move. I knew there were many more queens already in the hole, and many more being created. My guess was the Dark Horde was trying to box the acrobat ants out, a process called displacement. And from the looks of things, it seemed the Dark Horde was starting to get mighty cocky, knowing their numbers were increasing by the day. But while tensions were rising between the Dark Horde and the acrobats, at ground level, another rather new ant empire was quietly rising to power. Gnome ants, which I only started seeing in the forest just a few weeks ago, were now the primary dominating ants of the forest floor. They had seized a young huntsman spider and were taking their prized catch home to their nest. I loved watching them coordinate transporting such a massive kill. Now, I believe their queen, who was somewhere underground, was another one of the multitude of creatures in Pantdora that was unknowingly transported through the soils of the plants months ago. But we didn't get to see the workers until just recently. I don't actually know their exact species, but they sort of resembled a tinier version of fire ants. Watching them masterfully handle this killed spider was evidence that they were a tiny, yet terrible force to reckon with as far as ants go. The gnome ants proceeded to lift the spider up along a stick and into a hidden location where they were nested. I was happy to see the ants had successfully taken down a huntsman spider, because the now weeks-old huntsman juveniles were everywhere. They were growing and were so much leggier now. I found this scene rather peculiar. This spider appeared to be eating its own silk. Why would it be doing this? Any spider experts out there care to guess why it would be eating its own silk? Guess it was taking the term food web quite literally. Okay, bad pun. These juvenile spiders were the first set of young to Our Lady Deathstrike, their giant huntsman mother, who was last seen cradling her second egg sac at a location up high in the canopy. She's been moving around every now and then throughout this egg sac incubation period. The day before, she was here, right next to the side mesh over the pond. But strangely, over the past few days, she was nowhere to be found in Pantdora. I wondered where she could be hiding, especially because if my calculations were correct, the egg sac was scheduled to hatch any day now, assuming it was fertilized. I say assuming because she only made it once, months ago, which resulted in the last generation of huntsmen in the forest. But I still wasn't sure if baby huntsmen were going to hatch from this new egg sac. And I was hoping to catch the babies emerging, like I did with the last egg sac. I hoped I would spot her soon and find out if the egg sac had baby huntsmen. Turns out, I would get the answer to that question very soon. But not in a way I ever expected. I was in for a great surprise. I shouted when I spotted an unassuming budding growth on one of the driftwood pieces. Yay! AC family, you guys will love what this little tiny mushroom bud will turn into. I'm familiar with it because I've been seeing these mushrooms grow from the driftwood more and more, and I'm always stunned at how gorgeous it looks at its full development. Not to mention how fast it reaches full form. You'll see just how fast as we keep checking in on it throughout this video. And perhaps some of you mushroom experts can identify it when it's full grown and we can peep at its gills. As we've been seeing, fungi are omnipresent in the rainforest, which signifies a healthy ecosystem. Check out this weird spiky looking mushroom, sprouting from some earthworm cast. The plants of the rainforest have been thriving, as usual, but perhaps the most impressive recent growth has been up high in the canopy. Have a look. The recent death of Stanley, the bush cricket that used to ensure minimal new plant growth in the rainforest, gave the plants a complete unbridled freedom to grow and expand, especially up high in the canopy. The upper portions of the rainforest now took on a new, true jungle vibe with all the new asparagus fern growth. It was so beautiful. Even the vines themselves were sending out new leaves and tendrils to greet the energizing sunlight. But my plant trance was suddenly interrupted by a movement in the asparagus ferns. The ghost ant was back, and this time, it brought a friend. 2 ghost ants were now inspecting the foliage of the asparagus ferns.
Okay, sis, you ate with this place. Isn't it giving? Bet queen. It's giving high-key bougie Asian meets Gemini.
They discussed, like the Gen Gs that they were.
But do you really think the colony will love this place? Yes, and I'll show you why, sis.
Turns out the ghost ants had finally found something truly valuable in Pantdora, from which their colony would greatly benefit. Night always brings surprises in the rainforest, and this night had a special surprise for me to discover among the team of nighttime creatures. An unknown flying insect. A cricket moving through the vertical moss wall. An acrobat ant wandering the plants, where it eventually found a mealybug to milk honeydew from. A young roach feeding on some rotting banana. The tree frogs, as always, were out hunting for prey. The geckos had also emerged. Beneath the stump, I spotted Rocksteady, our resident rhino beetle, feeding on some rotten fruit. I also spotted a carpenter ant filling up, then disappearing into the darkness. But what I spotted next was truly magical. I scanned the termite mounds, which were growing little by little in this area beneath the stump, and when I shone a light deeper into the cave, I smiled. The termites had emerged. Awesome! This was the very first clear visual I had seen of the termites since episode 5 of the last season. After that spotting, when they were still living inside the stump, they were driven out by the black crazy ants, and as the weeks went on, I had wondered if the termites were still alive. I spotted soul workers here and there, but finally, here they were, swarming out in the open. The soldiers with guns on their faces, which could shoot out a toxic and sticky goo at enemies, were on guard, protecting the workers who were working on eating the wood around them. There were lots of rotting wood in Pantdora for them to consume. As you may recall, back when the vivarium was first constructed, I had buried pieces of decaying wood all around into the soils. I was looking forward to this termite colony growing in size, and their mounds becoming towering dirt mountains from beneath the stump. But as special as this sighting was, the termites weren't the biggest surprise I'd be spotting on this night. I caught sight of several of the huntsman juveniles on the glass, but I was caught off guard when I spotted this spider. Whoa! Wait, what? It was a baby huntsman, but this was no juvenile. See its size next to the mealybug? This was a newborn spiderling. No way! As I looked around some more, I spotted another. And another. The spiderlings were everywhere. Lady Deathstrike's egg sac had hatched. It was fertilized. How amazing! But where was Lady Deathstrike hiding? No matter where I looked, I couldn't find her even at night. I resolved to try looking again for our second time huntsman mother the next day. But nothing could have prepared me for the events that occurred the next morning. The next morning, the mushroom had already grown so much in size. Its color had gone from a purple to a more brownish maroon. This is what the mushroom looked like from beneath. Any mushroom experts care to give a species ID? Is it edible? Or, magic? Asking for a friend. I watched a newly emerged adult leafhopper moving around with its new wings. Whoopee! I love my new wings. I love them, I love them, I love them, it said as it rubbed them through its hind legs and stretched them out to get the blood pumping through them. This leafhopper, again, was one of those random creatures that I don't know how ended up in the vivarium, but that I could only assume was transported by way of plants, soil, or decor, perhaps as an egg. It was a cute little leafhopper with rainbow iridescent wings, which it couldn't wait to use. And when the time came to fly, it flew to heaven as it was caught by a huntsman juvenile and had died in an instant. Poor leafhopper. The huntsmen were very skilled hunters. Now that it was daytime, I could see more newborn huntsman spiderlings all around. By the color of their abdomens, I noticed that some had managed to catch their first meal overnight. Some already had missing legs and had to learn the hard way that the rainforest was full of dangers at every turn. I watched one spiderling just sitting there when suddenly...
Get out of here! I said out of here! This is our turf now! Out!
I was shocked to witness that the baby had fallen right into the jaws of its older sibling. But this baby huntsman had joined its mother. For scanning the forest floor, I finally spotted Our Lady Deathstrike. Crumpled up and dead. No, I never expected her to pass away like this after the birth of her second round of babies. But there she was, lifeless, and spirit having left across the Rainbow Bridge. It pained me to see that our giant huntsman mother, whom we followed dedicate her entire life to raising her 2 sets of children, had completed her life's purpose and expired. And so goes the harsh circle of life. As I gazed at the lifeless body of Lady Deathstrike, though my heart was filled with great sadness, saying goodbye to a legend of an arachnid, I did notice a variety of creatures coming to make use of her body. Dwarf ants had come around and began to feed. Phorid flies had already long discovered her body, drinking from exuding juices, as well as laying their eggs all over her. Mites and millipedes and soon worms would soon come to collect the food they could get from Lady Deathstrike's carcass. As sad as all of this was, I've come to learn through my observations in Pantdora that in nature, death is a necessary process for life to continue. Lady Deathstrike had given birth to some 800 huntsman babies who were all now doing their best to survive in the rainforest. But even if they didn't succeed, they still were supporting other life to continue forth and thrive. The net result in an ecosystem is always life. I caught sight of a web-building spider, yet another one of those creatures I had no idea was residing in Pantdora, and I noticed it had captured a mealybug. It strung it up in its web and began to feast. I was happy to see for the first time something that actually ate the mealybugs as food. But you know who else I discovered had found a liking to mealybug meat? The ghost ants. A ghost ant had picked up a stray wandering mealybug it had found and was presumably bringing it back to its colony, somewhere outside the vivarium. Pantdora had recently become a breeding ground for mealybugs, plant insects that produce sweet honeydew that ants love to eat. But the ghost ants had actually found mealybug meat delicious and were breaking into Pantdora to collect the stray mealybugs that were wandering the lands, that weren't surrounded by their protective waxy webs, to bring home to the colony as food. If this was what the ghost ants' business in the rainforest was, I felt it might actually be somewhat beneficial to have the ghost ants around, so long as their entire colony didn't come swarming into the rainforest. I was initially worried the plant parasites might have no natural predators, but it seems nature came to the rescue and sent them in for me. Speaking of parasites, I spotted a supermajor of the Terra Raiders, who in the last episode we discovered were infected by mites, and though this supermajor had an indented gaster, I did notice that there were less mites now than last week. I hope this meant the mites weren't the parasitic, blood-sucking kind, and that they would continue to fall off, because the Terra Raiders used to be such a powerful force in these forests, and it was sad to see them fall in glory like this. When I first started this project, I was excited to get a unique peek at the inner workings of a wild ecosystem, but what I didn't anticipate was how attached I would grow to the animals as I watched them live out their normal lives, then go once they reached their life's end. Even the death of the plants were saddening. The pitcher plants I'd attempted to plant in the rainforest months ago were beginning to wilt. As expected, the nutrients from the crickets and other creatures frequenting its soils have led to the plants failing. It was just amazing to me how different our Pantdora of today was compared to what it was like when I first started the Vivarium project just 4 months ago. The turnover of creatures, plants, and fungi blew my mind. It's incredible how much a 1,000-gallon volume of rainforest can change in just a third of a year. The species living in it, the vegetation, the biological relationships and interactions, so many changes in such a short amount of time. I felt honored to be able to be an observer and to learn about the true lives of living things in the rainforest. I was still waiting for our mantis egg sac laid by our late green reaper to hatch, which apparently could take up to 6 months. Overall, as our rainforest morphs and evolves more and more over time, one thing was for sure: Pantdora would forever be the greatest revelation of how epic the story of all of planet Earth must truly be. But AC family, so many of the creatures of the rainforest have had the opportunity to pass their genes onto the next generation, from Lady Deathstrike to the Green Reaper, the crickets, millipedes, and land planaria. But for the longest time, I've been hoping to find a mate for another very beloved creature in the forest. And today, I had some great news for our resident golden dragon. Smaug, I have a surprise for you. Hello, Daenerys. Welcome to the Ant Room. It's time. Behold, Pantdora. Your brand new kingdom for you to rule with an apex king. Be free. Vote in my community tab to affect this story.